Death Note is one of the greatest stories ever told in fiction, and works as the perfect gateway for anyone unfamiliar with anime. The series begins with Light Yagami, a brilliant student who one day finds a mysterious notebook that has fallen from the sky. When he reads the rules stating that he can kill anyone simply by writing their name while picturing their face, he initially thinks it is a joke. However, after testing it on a criminal shown on television and seeing him die of a heart attack 40 seconds later, he realizes that the power is real. Driven by a twisted sense of justice, Light decides to use the notebook to kill the world's worst criminals and purge society, earning the public nickname Kira. Soon afterward, Ryuk, the Shinigami who originally owned the notebook, appears before him and chooses to stay by his side simply because he is bored and wants to see what the human will do with such power. But cleansing the world is not so easy. The premise quickly evolves into a war of intellects when Interpol begins investigating these mysterious simultaneous deaths. With no clear leads, they turn to L, the world's greatest detective, an eccentric yet brilliant strategist. Through a masterful trap broadcast on television, L manages to deduce Kira's general location and realizes that he does not need to be physically present to kill. Since Light's father is the head of the Japanese police, the protagonist has access to confidential information, triggering a tense cat-and-mouse game in which both sides attempt to uncover the other's true identity before being eliminated. The board becomes even more chaotic with the introduction of unpredictable elements, such as Misa Amane, a famous idol who also possesses a Death Note. Unlike Light, she has made a deal to obtain the Shinigami Eyes, an ability that allows her to see a person's name and remaining lifespan simply by looking at them. However, what truly makes this work exceptional is the duality between its two protagonists and the deep moral dilemmas it raises. Does someone who commits atrocious crimes deserve a second chance? Light simultaneously assumes the roles of protagonist and villain, achieving something extremely rare in fiction, making a large part of the audience justify his actions and hope he wins. It is fascinating to watch his evolution and how power corrupts him, giving rise to such a massive god complex that he eventually abandons his original purpose, becoming willing to eliminate anyone who stands in the way of his vision of a perfect world. To counter a character like this, L functions as his perfect mirror, creating a spectacular clash of minds. What makes it even more interesting is the hypocrisy in both of their concepts of justice. Light justifies the murder of innocent investigators by claiming that anyone who opposes him is an enemy of peace. Meanwhile, L hunts Kira, arguing that no one has the right to take another person's life. Yet he himself does not hesitate to employ manipulation, invasion of privacy, and ethically questionable tactics to solve the case. Both characters are driven by immense ego, treating human lives like chess pieces, and bringing brilliant philosophical and ethical debates to the forefront. Dororo is based on a manga by Osamu Tezuka, father of the medium and creator of works such as Black Jack. Alongside Dororo, the manga has a companion piece, an animated series that adapts the printed version with many changes. The story of the anime focuses on the life of Hyakimaru, a wandering samurai who was sacrificed as a baby by his father through a pact with demons so that he could become the lord of his land and make the territory prosper. The soil was infertile, hunger was widespread, plagues were many, and natural disasters were constant. The price Hyakimaru paid was almost every part of his body, and to make matters worse, his family abandoned him, throwing him into a river where he was later found by a doctor. Years later, with the help of Dororo, an orphan thief, they travel across Japan killing monsters so the young samurai can gradually recover the parts of his body. At the same time, the protagonist's brother tries to decide whether he should help him or stop him, since recovering his body would break the pact with the demons and bring back the misery, plagues, and hunger to the land ruled by Daigo, his father. Although Dororo mostly consists of self-contained stories involving the protagonists, it is very interesting to see how Hyakimaru gradually changes his perception of reality in a very literal sense. One example is how he faces the difficulty of hearing for the first time after living almost his entire life without it, a problem that many real people experience. Another example is that at the beginning of the story, Hyakimaru does not know pain, literally because he had no nervous system, and once he obtains it, his entire perception and fighting style are forced to change. In stories like this, one usually sees characters growing stronger, but here the opposite happens. As the journey progresses, the young samurai faces increasingly powerful enemies, yet he becomes weaker and more human. It is also interesting to see the story from the protagonist's father and his younger brother, because there is a moral debate surrounding the boy's quest to recover his body. Every demon he kills causes his father's territory to fall once again into misery. The real emotional core of the story lies in the conflict between Hyakkimaru and his brother over the situation, and how both characters gradually lose their way under the obsession created by the consequences of this crusade. Even though the drop in visual quality and the narrative detour in the second half prevent the series from becoming an undisputed modern classic, Dororo 2019 remains worth watching because of its solid characters, excellent action, and the fresh way it explores concepts from previous versions. Berserk 1997 covers one of the most important arcs in the story, the Golden Age and the story of the Band of the Hawk. The story mainly follows part of the life of Guts, a great swordsman with a dark and mysterious past. His story takes place in a dark fantasy setting, very similar to Dark Souls. Guts travels the world carrying a massive and heavy sword in search of beings known as apostles, terrifying demons that plague the world. After annihilating an apostle known as the Snake Baron, he retrieves from its neck a very special object called a behemoth, which brings back many memories of a past life where he was simply a mercenary. From this point on, the rest of the episodes become a huge flashback that shows his entry into the Band of the Hawk, his rise to glory, and its terrible end. The Band of the Hawk is made up of Griffith, Casca, Judo, Pippin, Corcus, and Rickert. This group of mercenaries, over the years and through many wars, became a military legend. They managed to reach the top of the social pyramid through bloody and brutal battles that almost always ended in victory, thanks to the strategies of their leader, Griffith. He possessed an almost supernatural ability for war, motivator, military strategist, fighter, and excellent manipulator. Casca is the second in command, a strong and brave woman with a great talent for combat. Judo is a balanced and understanding man who always offers good advice. Pippin is the typical big, quiet guy everyone can rely on. Corcus is the most unpleasant character in the group, while Rickert is the youngest member of the squad, a boy with a noble heart. The events of the series revolve around this group of mercenaries, their victories, and their downfall. If there is one concept that encompasses the entire plot, it is dreams, the goals people pursue, and how they can grow stronger and more obsessive over time. Griffith had a clear dream from the beginning. He desired power and wanted to have a kingdom. Guts, on the other hand, is a man who has lived through countless experiences. He has fought hundreds of battles, suffered innumerable wounds, and watched several friends die. One of the key moments occurs when the two face each other for the second time. Guts decides to leave the band to pursue his own dream, and Griffith challenges him to a duel to force him to stay. However, Guts defeats him. This moment becomes a brutal turning point in the story because Griffith, for the first time in his life, experiences defeat. The loss throws him off balance, and he ends up committing a reckless act, seducing and sleeping with the king's daughter, which marks the beginning of his downfall. The subsequent torture of Griffith is one of the harshest moments in the entire story, the transformation of a godlike figure into a broken human wreck, a bloody spectacle full of mutilation and human misery. Without their leader, the Band of the Hawk is betrayed and decimated, while Casca struggles to keep alive what little remains of the group. But the real horror arrives with the eclipse, one of the most sinister and disturbing events in both the manga and the anime. Griffith, completely broken after his torture, is given an offer by the God Hand. Void, Slan, Ubik, and Conrad promise him absolute power in exchange for the lives of his friends. Using the Egg of the King, he chooses to sacrifice the entire Band of the Hawk to become one of them. The massacre is disturbing. Pippin, Corcus, and Judo die in heartbreaking scenes, while the rest of the army is devoured by demonic creatures. The few survivors are marked forever. After his demonic transformation, Griffith abuses Casca in the worst way possible in front of Guts in an extremely disturbing scene. Guts, trapped by a demon, cuts off his own arm to try to save her, but it is all in vain. He also ends up losing an eye. Thus ends the Golden Age arc, with a friendship destroyed, an army annihilated, and a desire for vengeance that cannot be extinguished. Back in the present, Guts walks the world with the scar of the eclipse on his neck, carrying his enormous sword and pursuing only one thing: revenge. Parasyte follows the story of Shinichi Izumi, a 17-year-old teenager who lives a normal life until one night when worm-like creatures known as parasites invade Earth. Their goal is to take control of humans by entering their brains through the ears or nose. One of these parasites attempts to possess Shinichi while he sleeps, but when it fails, it ends up lodging itself in his right hand. From that moment on, the parasite, who adopts the name Miki, takes control of his arm, and Shinichi must learn to coexist with it while dealing with the other creatures threatening humanity. The premise itself is not exactly innovative, but the development is what truly makes the series stand out. One might think the story will show Shinichi fighting a different monster every episode in an epic fashion. However, that is not really the case. The confrontations are usually short and strategy-based, relying far more on intelligence than brute force, which gives them a more realistic tone. The design of the creatures and the way they twist and deform human anatomy adds a raw body horror element that is both disturbing and fascinating. Instead of focusing purely on action, the series emphasizes world-building and philosophical dilemmas, making the viewer question the meaning of life, the nature of humanity, and even the uncomfortable idea that humans themselves might be the true parasites of Earth. When it comes to the characters, Shinichi and Migi are truly the heart of the story and have the strongest development. At first, Shinichi appears to be the typical weak protagonist, but the execution is far better than usual. He evolves from a frightened teenager into someone who actively seeks solutions, while gradually understanding the cold and logical nature of the parasites. His dynamic with Migi is excellent. Initially, they cooperate purely out of convenience and survival, not because of friendship or emotional bonds. However, after everything they go through together, they eventually develop a believable mutual respect. Another fascinating character is Reiko Temura. At first, she seems like someone who might disappear early in the story, but she ends up having an incredible evolution as she tries to understand human existence. The final arc contains a couple of convenient plot developments, but it still manages to close the central idea the story has been building since the very first episode. The plot was so engaging that I ended up watching 15 episodes in a single day, so I highly recommend it. Deadman Wonderland is very underrated. Everything begins in a dystopian world where a catastrophic earthquake has submerged much of Tokyo into the ocean. Amid the ruins stands a high-security prison known as Deadman Wonderland. However, this prison is unique because it also functions as a theme park and public entertainment center. Prisoners are forced to participate in disturbing games to entertain visitors and generate profits for the corporation that runs the facility. The main character of the story is Ganta Igarashi, a young high school student and survivor of the earthquake. However, he has no memories of the disaster and simply wants to live a normal life. Everything changes one day when a mysterious man covered in blood appears at the window of his classroom. This red man kills Ganta's classmates, but strangely leaves him alive and inserts a crimson crystal into his chest. Unfortunately for Ganta, he is considered the absolute culprit behind the massacre since he was found alone with the lifeless bodies of his classmates. Because of this, he is sentenced to death and sent to the Deadman Wonderland prison. Once there, he is fitted with a metal collar that slowly injects poison into his body. The only way to delay his execution is by consuming a special antidote that resembles a piece of candy every 3 days, temporarily postponing the inevitable. Inside the prison, Ganta meets a girl named Shiro, a strange young girl who seems very childish, but somehow knows things about the past that he cannot remember. She also appears to know Ganta personally in some mysterious way. Determined to prove his innocence and seek revenge, Ganta becomes obsessed with finding the Red Man, who may be somewhere within the prison, hoping that confronting him will finally clear his name and allow him to escape. Within Deadman Wonderland, Ganta discovers that he possesses a special power that allows him to control his own blood and use it as a lethal weapon. This ability is shared by other prisoners, known as Deadmen. These Deadmen are used in deadly battles in the Carnival Corpse, a brutal competition where they fight each other to the death for the entertainment of wealthy donors who pay to watch these spectacles. After all, Deadman Wonderland is essentially a tourist attraction, using prisoners as living toys and sources of amusement. Meanwhile, Ganta faces constant challenges within the prison, including brutal fights in the Carnival Corpse and the discovery of the dark secrets and experiments taking place behind the scenes at Deadman Wonderland. Terraformars tells the story of how humanity in the future decided to begin migrating to Mars due to the overpopulation of Earth. However, this epic undertaking cannot be achieved overnight. Instead, it requires a long process known as the terraforming of Mars. The protocol will be carried out by UNASA, an entity similar to NASA formed by multiple countries. In the year 2077, moss and cockroaches are sent to the Martian surface so that the planet can eventually develop characteristics suitable for human life. The cockroaches eat the moss and spread it across the surface, while the moss uses the cockroaches to expand as well. At the same time, the moss absorbs sunlight, gradually warming the planet until it reaches temperatures similar to those on Earth. 500 years later, a team of specialists travels to the Red Planet to examine the results, but none of them return. Another team is sent to verify the situation, but this time the members are people who have undergone surgery that grants them powers derived from different Earth insects. Only 2 of them make it back, bringing terrible news. The cockroaches have evolved into extremely strong and cruel anthropomorphic beings known as terraformers. The bad news does not end there. When the survivors return, their ship brings back a terrible virus with a 100% mortality rate, and the only way to find a cure is to search for it on its planet of origin, Mars. Nevertheless, hope is not lost thanks to the capture of a terraformer, which allows scientists to implant its remarkable evolutionary ability into humans. This grants people characteristics not only from insects, but from any living organism on the planet, including animals, plants, or even bacteria. Using this technology, a group of 100 people is sent aboard the spacecraft Annex 1 with the goal of putting an end to the extraterrestrial threat once and for all. The main message of the anime explores the perspective of what it would be like if humans were the pests instead of cockroaches, examining themes of evolution and how humanity might fall behind in terms of future development, potentially leading to extinction. Another theme is medical advancement as a weapon against the evolved cockroaches. This involves taking the characteristics of certain organisms and merging them with humans to grant them powerful combat abilities. We also see the personal motivations of the characters who join the expedition and the goals they hope to achieve by the end of the mission. Fights occur frequently, and many characters die in grotesque and highly graphic ways, demonstrating that no one is truly safe. This execution is undoubtedly the result of the core of Terraformars: combat. Rather than focusing on showing more of the world or exploring how the mission might be more meaningful than it initially appears, the anime emphasizes the conflict between humans and cockroaches, placing a stronger focus on bloodshed and violence. Dorohedoro follows Kaiman, a man searching for the sorcerer who transformed his head and erased his memories. To determine whether someone is the culprit, he shoves sorcerers' heads into his own mouth. Once inside, they see a mysterious human who tells them whether they are the one he is looking for. If they are not, Kaiman usually ends up killing them anyway. Alongside his best friend Nikaido, he hunts sorcerers in Hole, a grim city where its inhabitants despise and pursue them. During one of these encounters, a sorcerer named Fujita manages to escape by opening a door to the sorcerer's world, leaving the protagonists with access only to travel between that realm and Hole. One day, after returning from work, he visits Nikaido's restaurant and finds that she has been transformed into an insect by a spell. Thanks to that scene, I discovered a very strange fetish people have with forced transformations. To undo the curse, Kaiman tracks down and kills the sorcerer responsible. Soon afterward, a skull-masked sorcerer named Ebisu appears. When Kaiman tries his usual method on her, Fujita intervenes and rescues her, though the chaos leaves Ebisu badly injured and without her face. This leads to the introduction of En, the most powerful sorcerer, whose magic allows him to transform anything into mushrooms. En commands a group of elite enforcers, including Shin, who can slice through almost anything, and Noi, who possesses powerful healing magic. During an encounter with En's group in the middle of a chaotic zombie festival, a fierce battle breaks out. Kaiman forces Shin's head into his mouth so he can see the mysterious man inside him. However, Shin and Noi leave the protagonist severely wounded. Kaiman even has his head cut off. Despite this, Nikaido escapes, and it is revealed that she herself is a sorcerer. Kaiman later regrows another head, while the severed one is kept in a jar until a shadowy presence from the darkness steals it. Shin later reports to En that both Kaiman and the man inside him have cross-shaped peoples. En consults a bizarre sorcerer chef who cooks living dolls that maintain a link to their original bodies. Through this process, they discover a safe containing Kaiman's real head. Meanwhile, the researcher, Professor Kasukabe, shows Kaiman and Nikaido a door that leads to the sorcerer's world. There, Kaiman encounters people with the same cross-shaped eyes connected to the mysterious Risu. When Shin and Noi appear and slaughter several of them, fragments of Kaiman's lost memories begin to return, hinting that Risu may be tied to his true identity. Later, Nikaido seeks help from Asu to infiltrate the mansion of the powerful sorcerer En. During the chaos, she breaks En's mask, unleashing his unstable mushroom magic and escaping with a strange mushroom growing from her back. When Vox and Kasukabe examine her, they confirm that Nikaido is actually a sorcerer. As the mystery deepens, Ebisu briefly transforms into a giant lizard, and it is revealed that she was responsible for the spell that originally connected Risu's head to Kaiman. Seeking answers, Kaiman later travels alone to the sorcerer's world and begins working for Tumba. During the event known as Blue Night, Noi's healing magic accidentally restores Risu's body, bringing him face to face with Kaiman, though strangely, neither of them reacts. From there, the story moves toward uncovering the truth behind Kaiman's transformation and the tangled identities linking him to Risu. Neon Genesis Evangelion is set in a post-apocalyptic Earth that is being attacked by powerful creatures called angels. Because of this, scientists have created a kind of giant cyborgs known as Evas, which can only be piloted by selected teenagers. One of them is the protagonist, a 14-year-old boy named Shinji Ikari. Shinji has been recruited by his father, a cold and distant man who runs the secret intergovernmental agency responsible for creating the Evas. The organization's purpose is to defeat these alien angels, equally massive beings determined to destroy the human race. The Evangelions are humanity's ultimate weapon, the only force powerful enough to destroy them. The teenagers are placed inside a chamber filled with a kind of amniotic liquid, and their nervous systems are connected to the Evas so that their bodies receive energy, or become exhausted, at the same pace as the massive robotic machine. This bond is profound. Throughout the anime, the pilots struggle to define themselves both inside and outside of Eva. The teenagers experience mental crises and constantly question who they are and what they truly value. Although Shinji does not want to fight, he is forced to do so, because if he refuses, humanity is doomed. He, along with Rei, Asuka, and the other EVA pilots, faces a constant crossroads throughout the series. After all, they are simply teenagers, who, instead of living a peaceful life like any teenager, must risk their lives fighting terrifying, biblically inspired angels, and they cannot afford to lose, or everyone dies along with them. The anime explores many themes such as psychology and religion, incorporating numerous philosophical elements. As each episode unfolds, the situation grows increasingly bleak, leaving us with far more questions than answers. On the surface, it appears to be a somewhat dystopian mecha anime that subverts the traditional idea of angels, portraying them in a faithful yet terrifying way, and presenting them as enemies of humanity. But beneath the surface, the story delves into human emotions, moral choices, and our ability to empathize with these teenagers, who deep down question whether they truly have faith, or if they are simply accepting a single inevitable destiny. The battles between angels and Evangelions are depicted in a brutal and bloody way, as are the emotional and psychological struggles the characters face when confronted with the possibility that the world could end at any moment, when all they truly want is to continue living a normal life they will never have.